Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we are going to be covering a lot of playoffs. As usual, we will be breaking down all the playoff action from last night, including the Knicks overcoming the injury bug to take a 2-0 lead over the Indiana Pacers as the series heads back to Indiana for Game 3 coming up tomorrow. We'll also take a look at the hockey games. There were some wild results there. There was a 136 minutes of penalties given out in the third period alone of the Boston Bruins Florida Panthers game. We will talk about that as well as the Canucks finishing off a 5-4 thrilling comeback victory over the Edmonton Oilers with a third string goalie. We'll see if they can keep that up. And then we will also talk about the breaking news in the NBA with Suns head coach Frank Vogel getting fired before we move into the NFL and talk about some wide receiver moves that have happened today with the Giants and the Texans making yet another move to bolster an already stacked wide receiver room. But before we get into that, if you are here watching live and you'd like to leave a tip or donation, go to the link on screen right now. That is gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate anything you do give. You can control what we talk about here on the show. If you have a burning question, go ahead and give it ask in the comments in the donation. We will get to it as soon as we possibly can. We appreciate that. But like I was saying, we have a lot of playoff ball to talk about. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. There's so much going on around the world of sports in the playoffs these days. We're going to start off in the NBA, as we usually do, talking about the New York Knicks. They overcome the injury bug. And the injuries have been a major story for the Knicks all playoffs long. It was the reason that I didn't have them winning the first series against the 76ers, which, as we all know now, has turned out to be wrong. They were able to dominate the inside, even without Joel Embiid. But, now they're out Mitchell Robinson, probably for the rest of the playoffs. A big inside presence coming off the bench that's nice to have to spell a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein, who has done a really, really good job on the inside all playoffs long. Jalen Brunson goes down in the first quarter with a foot injury, groin injury. He called a foot injury. It looked weird, but he comes off the court in the first quarter, doesn't play the second quarter, comes back in the third and plays the rest of the second half. He played an important part in that game, keeping them ahead of the Pacers. And then at the end of the game, star OG Anunoby, their defensive centerpiece, goes down with an injury, and he did not return. So that is something to keep an eye on with the Knicks. Injuries are really going to hurt them, and it kind of comes with the territory with these Thibodeau teams. We kind of glossed over that a little bit, but what Thibodeau does, he plays his starters the whole game. Josh Hart has played 48 minutes in the last 4 games the Knicks have played. And he's done a great job. He's been huge, but you're putting a big toll on these players' bodies. Thibodeau is often bemoaned for ruining Derrick Rose because he played him too much. And you can say what you will about him. This is his style of coaching. This is what he does. It isn't a special thing, but it does come with risk factors. And it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows like it has been in this playoff series, in this playoff run so far. It's only going to be able to take you so far. You need to be able to have these guys off the bench spell the starters, because you can't have these guys playing 50 minutes a game. It's not healthy for them. There's not enough rest in between it. It's too intense. But they're doing it right now, right? And if they can get a nice quick series, it will be very beneficial. I don't expect the Cavaliers to put up too much of a fight against the Celtics. And because of that, the Celtics are going to have their rest. They're going to have a chance to wait for Porzingis to come back, which should be a huge thing against the Knicks, who already are down a big man in Mitchell Robinson, 2 big men in Julius Randle as well. So if we look ahead to the next round, what most likely will happen, again, never want to call it before it's over, but most likely what's going to happen is it's going to be Knicks, Celtics, And it doesn't look like a great matchup for the Knicks because of their injuries, where they're sitting at right now. If they were a healthy team, 100% healthy, they could give them a fight, because both of these teams have elite defenses. And this is something that I've noticed in this playoffs. The big theme of the regular season, at least one of the big themes of the regular season, was the explosion of offense over the last couple years. The new no one plays defense in the NBA anymore. But as we take a look in this second round of the NBA playoffs, right? We are left with 6 teams in the top 10 in defensive ratings. So out of these 8 teams, 6 of them are in the top 10 in defensive ratings. You have the teams that are winning, the teams that have won every single game in these rounds has been a team with an elite defense. The only teams that aren't up there are the Mavericks and the Pacers, and we're seeing what's happening to those two teams. The Knicks playing the Pacers, scoring 120 plus points in both games. The Pacers are a team that usually can keep up with that, but the Knicks defense is holding them back, and Jalen Brunson is out-dueling everybody yet again. Like I said, the Knicks defense and Jalen Brunson is an elite combination, at least the way that Jalen Brunson is playing right now. But defense has been such a huge story of the postseason. You talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have kind of shocked the world going up against the defending champion Denver Nuggets. They've been insane. Their defensive effort, they held the Denver Nuggets to 80 points, the lowest scoring output of the entire season. In the second round of the playoffs, they were able to hold the Denver Nuggets, or a healthy Denver Nuggets team, down. It held the Denver Nuggets team that had all its starters. Now, granted, Jamal Murray is dealing with a quad thing, but he's still on the court, he's still playing basketball, and it's gotten them frustrated. You talk about the Knicks series, their defensive pressure, even when Jalen Brunson is off the court. Sure, they gave up a lot of points when he wasn't on the court. You can kind of see the difference when you look at the plus-minus numbers. Jalen Brunson is plus 26. Everybody else is, the next closest person is Hartenstein, who is at plus 21. But outside of that, no one is over plus 20, which usually with the way that Thibodeau does things, all your starters are going to have similar plus-minuses. DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and OG Anunoby all are sitting around the plus 10 mark. So we're looking at not a great team without Jalen Brunson. And it really, really did show in the quarter that he wasn't there. So it's an interesting thing, because we talk about how defense doesn't exist anymore, but in these playoffs, defense is what's winning game. And this is not the way that I thought the Knicks would be able to win these games against the Pacers. We talked about it after Game 1 a little bit. This is the way the Pacers want to play the game. High pace, wear out this team that's playing its stars for 40 plus minutes a game. These guys aren't ready. They can't possibly keep this pace for a 6-game series. But winning the first 2 at this pace is huge. You go back to Indiana, and sure, they've been much better in Indiana than they have been on the road, but that just comes with the territory. The Knicks need to find a way to slow this game down, especially with an injured OG Anunoby, who, while not filling out the stat sheet, has been so important to them throughout these playoff runs. If you watch the games, his defense, his defensive pressure, his ability to poke the ball away, make other teams uncomfortable out on the perimeter, is something that has really, really benefited the Knicks. You talk about against the 76ers, he made a whole bunch of great plays down the stretch in Game 5 and 6 to keep the Knicks in it. I know they only ended up winning one of those games, but again, he's just been such a huge, underrated part of this team ever since they got him. It's going to be interesting. I think that might be a bigger loss than a lot of people realize. This Pacers team is very good at shooting the basketball. Tyrese Halliburton, after a stinker in Game 1, comes back 7 of 11 from 3 with 34 points. This is the kind of game that they can give you. The Pacers can give you 120 points every single night. That's the kind of team that they are. The Knicks aren't quite that team offensively. And they just kind of willed past the Pacers. I think if this game was in Indiana, the Knicks would not have been able to come back, because there was a hole there in that second quarter. They had to come out and dominate that third quarter to really keep this game even. They were tied after one, down 10 after two. That's the Jalen Brunson effect. And then in the third quarter, they dominate that game. They get Jalen Brunson back, and they flip a switch, and they don't really look back. Indiana is able to keep it close near the end, but they don't really look back at that point. So we're looking at a team in the Knicks where it's just so important for them to have a guy like Jalen Brunson. It's so important for them to have these high octane and this defense that's able to shut down different players on any given night. Now you're not going to shut down Tyrese Halliburton for 7 games in a series. That's just a given. You're not going to be able to shut him down. But if you can slow him down for a game or two, like in game one, they slowed him down. It was huge. They probably won because of that. Game two, they're not able to slow him down, but they are able to definitely slow down Pascal Siakam, who did not have a great game from the field. He had 14 points, but it wasn't the kind of number 2 option game that you're looking for in the playoffs, especially against a tough opponent like the Knicks. Again, I don't want to count out the Pacers, but if the Knicks continue to play like this, it's going to be really tough for the Pacers to stay in this. We're going to stay with basketball, though, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you have any thoughts on the New York Knicks or Indiana Pacers or anything around the NBA playoffs, go ahead and leave a comment before we move on. We're going to talk a little bit about the breaking news in the NBA with the Suns firing their head coach coming up in the next segment. But if you have any thoughts, go ahead and leave it in the comment. We'll get to that before we get there. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We'll be right back covering that breaking news in the NBA. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits some losing shit and stupid me. If you choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just broke down the Knicks-Pacers Game 2, where the Knicks got bit by the injury bug once again. Were able to overcome it and take a hard-fought Game 2, a high-scoring Game 2. Not really the type of game that the Knicks want to play against the Pacers, but they were able to take both games in that kind of fashion, which is good news for the Knicks. It's not quite good news for the Pacers, but injuries are a bit of a concern. In this segment here, there's some breaking news coming out of the NBA. Frank Vogel, the head coach from the Phoenix Suns, one season was fired after just 1 year. It was a little bit of an underperformance, and we will break all of that down in just a second. But before we do, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports that you need me to ask, go to the website along the ticker. That's gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate anything you do give. We appreciate you spending time on a beautiful Thursday watching and talking sports with us. But like I was saying, we're going to talk a little bit about the breaking news in the NBA. Breaking news, Suns fire head coach Frank Vogel. Frank Vogel was brought into Phoenix this year, so it's a one-and-done situation for Frank Vogel, who previously had coached for the Lakers, winning a title back in 2020. Vogel went 49-33 this year in Phoenix after signing a 5-year deal to be the head coach after they let go of Monty Williams, who, as we saw in Detroit, was not the greatest option to lead a team over there, so probably the right decision. It seems like the Suns are in a bit of a pickle. They don't have any cap space because all of it is going to their top three guys. Top three guys in Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal, both of whom aren't, all of those guys who, aren't really peak anymore. This is not peak Bradley Beal. This is not peak Kevin Durant, and they don't really mesh that well together. They all need the ball in their hands, and they can all show up and give you 50 points a night, which is a really nice threat to have. But when you can't surround the team with other talent, Bradley Beal needs to put up a lot of shots to put up those numbers. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant don't, but when you're giving Bradley Beal all those shots, you're taking shots away from Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Or your defense is suffering because of it. These guys are not known for their defense. And as we talked about a little bit in the first segment, defense has really been a huge part of these playoffs. All the teams that are succeeding right now are top 10 in the league in defensive rating. At least they were in the regular season. And it's been a huge part of who's winning and who's not. Sources are saying that Mike Budenholzer, former Bucks coach, is the number one candidate to replace Vogel. Budenholzer, who was pretty successful up in Milwaukee with Giannis and the Bucks, could be a good fit. Really, it's a tough situation walking into the Suns. The issue being you don't have that much flexibility. You kind of are at the whims of your star players because you look at their cap space. Bradley Beal is going to be making $50 million. Kevin Durant is going to be making $50 million. Devin Booker is going to be making $50 million. These guys are taking up like 3/4 of your cap space, maybe even more if you look at the numbers. You're only left with about $30 million to fill out the rest of that roster, and this you can see what they're suffering. That always has been the issue with the Suns ever since they acquired all of these deals. But you take a look at the situation there, and there's not a lot they can do to improve. The Suns want to win, and they want to win with this core, but they can't. They're not in a position where they can take on a team like the Nuggets. They're not in a position where they can take on a team like the Thunder or the Timberwolves, teams that can slow you down on defense. It's not something that is successful. They need to be able to be smart with their money, and it's not really a spot that it's not a spot they're good in. You might, if you're the Phoenix Suns, have to swallow your pride and say, hey, it isn't working. We're not going to win a championship with this core. I know they just did it this season, and it might seem like an overreaction to getting swept. But you can't look at me and seriously tell me that this Suns team, after what you've seen this season with the rest of the Western Conference where it's at, you can't seriously look at me and say, hey, this Suns team can win a ring. Because I just don't see it. They don't have the defensive personnel or the money to go get that defensive personnel to get it done. It's just not something that they have the resources to do, unfortunately. So taking a look at a team like the Suns, you might have to blow it up. You can get a lot of good assets for Kevin Durant, who's got some money left on, who's still got some term left on his contract. You can hold on to Devin Booker. You can hold on to him if you'd like and build around him again. He's probably the best one to build around. Bradley Beal is going to be tough to flip. His contract is massive. It's only going to be more. He's making $51 million this next season. The money is going to be tough to even out. But, there is going to be some kind of team, as long as you eat some of that contract, that's going to be willing to take a shot on a Bradley Beal. That's going to be willing to go get a guy that can come out and give you 50 points on any given night, as long as he stays healthy. It might be time for the Suns to blow it up. And it seems a little early to fire Frank Vogel, honestly. I don't think this season was his fault. Someone had to be blamed for this. This was an awful season. They were being crowned champions in the offseason because they went out and they got Bradley Beal and they had this big three. They just didn't have the depth to surround it. And unfortunately, there was nothing that Frank Vogel could do about that. He can't have 10 Kevin Durants out there, and I'm sure he could if he wanted to. I'm sure if he wanted to. Sorry, excuse me. I'm sure he wants to have 10 Kevin Durants out there. It's a good person to have 10 of, but he can't. You need to build a roster around these guys. You need to build one that fits. It can't just be a fantasy team. It doesn't work. There have been big threes in the past that work, but they all have different fits, and you're starting to see it now more than ever that the team that has to mesh together for it to work. You can have, these three guys, these three superstars, these three all-stars all in your same roster, but if they don't mesh together, if they all have the same play style, it's not going to work out, and none of them play defense, so they're not helping you on the other end. That's dead weight on one end of the court for 60% of the guys that are out there. It's not a recipe for success in the NBA nowadays. Sure, it's good to outscore everyone. It is, but when you run into a defense that can actually play defense, a team that can shut you down on defensively, it's going to be really tough for the Suns to compete, and they're going to continue to compete. This is not a team that has any inkling to fire to blow up their team, but it's something that I think should cross their mind. There's plenty of stuff that they can do to make their team better, and I think at this point it might be time to throw in the towel. That's just my opinion, though. Let me know what you think about the Suns firing their coach. What do you think they should do? What do you think about Budenholzer being potentially brought in to replace Frank Vogel there? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But in our next segment coming up, we're going to transition out of basketball, talk a little bit of football. Going to talk about some wide receiver movements. I apologize. We're going to stay in basketball. There's some awards given out. We're going to talk about Jokic winning his third MVP in 4 seasons. We're going to talk about some of the other awards that have been given out so far. The NBA has been slowly giving out its awards as time goes on. So we'll talk about all of that coming up in segment 3 in just a second on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just broke down the breaking news that the Suns have fired their head coach after 1 season at the helm, ending in a sweep at the hands of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are currently up 2-0 on the defending reigning champions, the Denver Nuggets. In this segment here, we're going to talk a little bit about some awards that have been giving out. Nikola Jokic wins MVP for the third time in 4 seasons. An insane run of dominance that we have only seen from a center one other time before. Uh, it's been very, very impressive to see. We're going to break down what insane company it puts him in. All Hall of Famers, top players of all time is where it puts him. So, but before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports that you would love me to talk about, leave a donation or a comment on the website going along the ticker. That's gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we're going to talk a little bit about Nikola Jokic winning MVP. Nikola Jokic wins his third MVP in 4 seasons. Again, an insane run. Only the first time a center has done that since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did that in the 70s. He did it twice, actually. He's won 6 MVPs. Adds Jokic to a list of just 9 players to win 3 MVPs. You know, putting him, again, with Kareem, putting him with Jordan, putting him with Bill Russell, LeBron James, Wilt Chamberlain, Moses Malone, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. All of these guys are legends. Legends in the game. These guys are insane. And you put Jokic's name alongside of them, it is a huge, huge part for his legacy. If he's able, this run of dominance is really rare to see. 3 MVPs in 4 years is incredibly tough to do. This Jokic has come on and he's been just a completely different animal in this league. It was definitely his award. So the first time that, first time in 6 decades, in 60 years that this has happened. I'll have to go all the way back to the 70s. Nikola Jokic wins in a landslide. He had 79 first place votes. He had 926 total points. The next closest person was Shea, who finished with 640. Shea, who had a great season. I've heard some people say he deserved the MVP. Nikola Jokic definitely deserved the MVP. And I could understand some arguments, I think a lot of those arguments come more from a place of recency bias or voter fatigue than anything. Not to say anything that Shea did wasn't incredible. Averaging 30 points a game that young into your career, taking a super young team and leading them to the number 1 seed in the West, it's been incredible. He played 79 games. He is the second player ever to finish top 5 in points, rebounds, assists in multiple seasons. And he hit 2,000 points, 900 rebounds, and 600 assists in 1 season. These are insane numbers. We're comparing him to Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson with these numbers. And he is doing it from a position that was starting to die out. There wasn't really an elite center in the NBA for a really long time. And now Jokic and Embiid come in and they are dominating the league just like the big men used to do in the past. Looking back at the MVP voting, it's interesting to see who got votes at the end. Domantas Sabonis got one fourth place vote. Kevin Durant got a 5th place vote. Anthony Edwards picked up 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 3/5. And Jason Tatum got a whole bunch of 4th and 5th place votes. Jalen Brunson, 142, finishes 5th behind Giannis, Luka, Shea, and Jokic. It's an interesting list here because a lot of these guys had seasons cut short because of injury. I think Embiid, if he plays the 65 games this season, this is his award. He doesn't reach that mark. He doesn't get the award. He gets hurt, unfortunately. But Jokic was the clear and obvious choice. And again, I've heard lots of debates over this, but I do think that Jokic is a guy that definitely deserved to win this award. So, congrats to him. It's incredibly impressive what he's been able to do. Uh, it's been so impressive, just in the way that he doesn't seem to care about basketball. He's just really good at it for no reason. It's very, very, very cool to see just how good Jokic could be, and it's scary to think how good he could be if he put his mind, body, and soul into it. If he had the work ethic for basketball like a guy like LeBron James had, it's scary to think how much better a guy like Jokic could be. But we're not going to think about that. We're just going to stay in the moment, think about how good he already is. He is on a quest to win his second straight finals MVP, or finals, and most likely finals MVP if they do win it. He is again on an insane run, putting him in the legacy conversation with Kareem, with Jordan, with LeBron, up there for guys that have won 3 or more MVPs. There's only 9 people that have done it, and all of them are first ballot Hall of Famers. His time being the top of the league, undoubtedly, is a lot shorter than a lot of these other guys. You look at some of this list, and you can kind of sense the end of the Jokic era. It's not here yet. Jokic is still dominating, but he's a guy that's not going to play forever. He's already 29. He's not going to play until he's 40, like LeBron does. He'll probably play about 5 more years. But you're putting him in conversations with Jordan, who dominated for decades, with Bill Russell, dominated for decades, LeBron James, Wilt Chamberlain, Moses Malone, Larry Bird, all these guys, Kareem, all these guys dominated for like 10 years at their positions, and Jokic is doing this, dominating for 5. He's done it in half the time. It's really, really impressive to see how quickly he has climbed that mountain to be the top of the basketball world. And it's interesting to see. It's interesting to think about how long he'll be up here, because there's people coming for that throne. Wemby is coming for that throne, and he'll be there soon, I think. Just the way that he improved steadily over the entire first year in the league, he's gonna come for that throne soon. So enjoy this while we can. Jokic is going to be a part of the NBA history forever for what he's done in this short period of time. 3 MVPs in 4 seasons is, again, insane. There's only 9 people that have ever won 3 MVPs, and he's done it almost consecutively. You could make an argument that he should have, and I think he should have won it last season. This season, if Embiid had stayed healthy, I think it should have gone to Embiid, so it kind of balances out in the end. But overall, just an incredible career from Nikola Jokic. Not over yet. He's on a run. He can add more to his legacy. But if it ended today, he's already a certified first ballot Hall of Famer, and he's so good at basketball. He's fun to watch. He's going to be the triple-double king in a season. He'll pass Russell Westbrook and Oscar Robertson and all those guys that are up there. He'll pass him soon, and then that'll add one more tick to his legacy. He's really good. But let me know what you guys think. Nikola Jokic, do you think he deserved it? Do you think Shea should have gotten it? Let me know what you think in the comments below. In our next segment, we are going to move out of the hardwood. We're going to move into football. There was some wide receiver moves happening around the league. We'll talk about what that means for those teams as the Giants and the Texans add more to their wide receiver rooms. So stick around. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Nikola Jokic winning his third MVP as the NBA awards continue to roll in. Deserving, he etches his name in a list of some of the greats of all time accomplishing this feat. So very, very impressive from him as his career continues to only become more and more legendary. In this segment, we're going to move into football. We're going to talk about some wide receiver moves that happened, talk about some Texans wide receivers, and talk about Giants signing another wide receiver to bolster a really weak wide receiver room. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports that you would like me to answer, go ahead and put a comment or a donation. I will get to that as soon as I can. We appreciate everything you do give. Appreciate you guys sticking around and watching the show. But like I was saying, we're going to move into some football here in this segment. We're going to talk about wide receivers once again. Wide receivers are moving around the NFL real quickly. They're a position that moves around a lot anyway. Some older guys and some backup guys got signed today. We're going to start in New York with my New York Giants making a move to bolster the wide receiver position. They obviously drafted Malik Nabers with the 6th overall pick, a true number 1 for New York that they haven't had since they traded away Odell Beckham Jr. He joins a wide receiver room that's filled with wide receiver 2s and 3s. Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton are your deep threats. Isaiah Hodgins is down there in the bottom, and now they add Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, who had a stretch in the 2010s, early 2020 into early 2020s, where he was an elite wide receiver with the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Chicago Bears without good quarterback play really ever. He was always a great guy to have. He goes to the Rams 2 seasons ago. That doesn't quite work out. He hasn't been the same in the last 3 or 4 seasons now. He was on the Steelers last year, and he still hasn't bounced back. Now he goes to the New York Giants, a team that desperately needs wide receiver help. So he's going to be out there probably as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 there behind Malik Nabers and whoever else is going to be the slot guy. You have Allen Robinson go out there, and he's going to be a really valuable piece, assuming he can bounce back. It isn't a guarantee. It's a cheap deal laden with incentives, but you get a veteran wide receiver in that room with a young guy like Malik Nabers. He's a guy that's been there, done that, and has experience. He's a great person to have with Malik Nabers. You lost your veteran wide receiver presence in the offseason. Granted, Sterling Shepard is still a free agent. He's a very important piece of that Giants locker room, but I feel like they are kind of clearing out. They left Saquon Barkley walk, which is a whole nother thing. Probably should not have done that, but they let him walk. He goes to the Eagles. Sterling Shepard is still out there. He's injury prone, but when he's on the field, he's productive. He's a nice wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 guy to have, just to come up with those nice over the middle catches. He's just a little too injury prone to really sign to a big long term contract. But you lose your big veteran presence. You go grab another veteran in Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson comes in. And he can, like I said, he can be a mentor for a guy like Malik Nabers. He can really help him just figure out the NFL. It's different than college. It's nice to have a guy with experience dominating the league like Allen Robinson, even if he is on the end of his career on downturn. The Giants offense is a good spot for him. He doesn't need a great quarterback to succeed. He's proven that. He was thriving with Mitch Trubisky. He was thriving with Blake Bortles in Jacksonville. These are guys that 10 years from now we're not going to remember them. They're not great quarterbacks, but Allen Robinson was having pretty good success with both of them. It didn't quite work out when he moved, when there was a downturn with the Bears at the end of his tenure there, and he hasn't quite been able to bounce back. I believe 3 years ago, 2021, he kind of just fell off a cliff. I'm a big fan of Allen Robinson. He's done me good in fantasy before, but it's a little biased there. I don't know if he's going to be able to bounce back, but having a nice veteran presence in that locker room is good for those young wide receivers, especially on a team like the Giants that don't have that much expectation. It's kind of a prove-it year for Daniel Jones. They don't have the money to go out and sign or make a trade for a big wide receiver like a Brandon Ayuk or a Deebo Samuel that has been rumored to be out there on the trade block. But you can go get a veteran presence, a guy who's going to have a great veteran presence for these younger receivers, and it's good to go out and get them. The other piece of wide receiver news that's been going around the NFL today, Ben Skoranek, the utility fullback wide receiver that the Rams drafted in the 7th round, was traded to the Texans. Another wide receiver the Texans are grabbing, so they're stocking up on wide receivers here. He gets traded to the Texans in exchange for a 6th round pick, and they're also sending over a 7th. So they get a nice little return on investment for Ben Skoranek, who has been a solid producer when he's on the field. He didn't play as much as he had last year, as he had in previous years, thanks to having outbreak of a year from Puka Nacua, who kind of just stole his touches. So he would have been cut most likely. He goes to the Texans, joining a really crowded wide receiver room. You have Stephon Diggs, you have Tank Dell, you have Nico Collins. Those are some really, really great guys. He's not going to see the field too often, but in a utility role, or maybe in a kickoff role, Ben Skoranek is a nice guy to have on your team, and you didn't give up too much for him. Tank Dell does have his injury right now after getting shot in Florida. All news says that he's going to make a full recovery and should be fine for the season, but it's nice to have a security blanket in a guy like Ben Skoranek, who can really run the whole route tree, is really flexible with what he can do. He'll get downhill and block for you. He's not the biggest guy, but he'll get his nose in there and get in the way of these linebackers or defensive tackles. Like I said, he's played fullback before. He's not your typical fullback, but you're seeing him. We've seen him line up in that Sean McVay offense at the fullback position, be a lead blocker, be open on play action, be able to be a very versatile player in a good Sean McVay offense. So it's not a bad thing to have, and there is a lot going on in that Texans locker room. It's gonna be interesting to see the hierarchy of receivers with the Texans this season. Like I said, just those top 3: Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. Those guys are all really good. Stephon Diggs, obviously a true number 1 receiver. Tank Dell, when he in that little stretch towards the end of the season before he got hurt, he was proving that he could be a number 1 option. And Nico Collins, once Tank Dell went down, really stepped up into that role and did a great job at that number 1 wide receiver, filling those wide receiver 1 shoes. So all 3 of those guys have experience being wide receiver 1. All 3 of those guys have experience in just the last year being a successful wide receiver 1. It's a great wide receiver room, and we spent some time talking about the Texans wide receiver room after they added Tyler Boyd. They have Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. All 3 of those guys have experience being wide receiver 1. The riches of wide receivers in the AFC South is phenomenal. It really is. There's not too many divisions that can boast that kind of wide receiver. And even looking at Jacksonville with Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas, rookie in the draft, who I think can be a good deep threat. Christian Kirk's a really nice route runner, gets open across the middle. And then, in the Colts, you've got Josh Downs. You've got A.D. Mitchell, who they got in the draft, a steal in the second round, and of course Michael Pittman Jr., who exploded onto the scene last season, had a really, really good year. So it's very impressive, the depth of wide receiver talent in that division. The Texans the Texans with the quarterback C.J. Stroud as well, it's going to be tough to beat them. That's going to be a really fun division to watch. I expect a lot of high-scoring games when they play each other, kind of shootouts, because none of those guys really have elite defenses. You can destroy the Jacksonville defense through the air. They didn't really fix that issue in the offseason. The Colts have plenty of issues in the secondary and pass rushers. The Titans defense is a mess, and the Texans defense, especially their run defense, could use an upgrade. But this should be a fun division for this entire season. Fun to keep an eye on. Let me know what you guys think of some of these wide receiver moves and anything else that we talked about in the AFC South as far as that division goes. In our fifth and final segment today, we are going to move on to the ice, talk a little bit about the insane stuff going on in the world of hockey from last night. So stick around for that. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just broke down some of the big wide receiver news from the day today. And before that, we talked a lot of basketball. Nikola Jokic won his third MVP in 4 seasons, and we broke down the Knicks winning Game 2 and the Suns firing their head coach. So go check that out if you're interested. In this segment here, closing out our show, we're going to cover the NHL. There were some really great hockey games last night, including a lot of really interesting stuff coming out of it. We'll start in just a second, but before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do decide to leave a tip or donation, we appreciate it. Burning question about sports, leave a comment, tip, or donation. We will get to that as soon as we possibly can. Appreciate all of you for sticking around and watching on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get right into our fifth and final segment, talking about the NHL. We'll start off with a less interesting game. The Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers combine for 7 goals. The Bruins lose 6-1. The Bruins were up 1-0 after the first period, and then they were unable to really get anything going. What made this game interesting, aside from the Bruins giving up a franchise record 6 unanswered goals, which is not a good look, is the third period. There was a scuffle, a fight, a full-blown, everyone on the ice was fighting, that resulted in 136 penalty minutes in just the third period alone. For those who don't know, a hockey game only has 60 minutes. There were enough penalties to cover more than 2 hockey games in just the third period. It's an incredibly scrappy series. The Panthers come back after dropping game 1. They played a really great game. Jeremy Swayman finally looked human for the first time this playoffs. They should switch over to Linus Ullmark, which really isn't much better for the Florida Panthers, which is kind of the saving grace here. There might have been a, better... They're usually in that situation when you chase a goalie and you get to their backup, you're like, okay, good, we're gonna be fine. And yes, Ullmark did let 2 goals in, but it's like in baseball, if you're more familiar with that. A reliever is much better when he gets a clean inning than when he comes in with the bases loaded and 1 out. It's a lot tougher in that situation to just get in and lock in immediately, especially when you come in the middle of the third period with your team already down by 3 goals or 4 goals at that 3 goals at that point. Excuse me. It's not really over. It's still tied at 1. The Florida Panthers took advantage of the lack of depth from the Bruins, and that's really what it came down to. Sergei Bobrovsky had a great game, but the Bruins here were just outmatched at the end. They struggled to get offense going past that first period, and that's a lot to the credit of a team. It's a lot to the credit. It's a real team effort. They only had 15 shots. Almost all of those were in the first period, where again Boston was dominating. And this has happened before. It happened in the Leafs. They were up 3-1. The games 5 and 6. They got a total of 3 shots in the first period of those 2 games combined. It's not a good look. The Boston offense kind of disappears every once in a while, which not great. But it's a mess, this box score. If you take a look at the penalty screen, you have to do like 3 scrolls to get to the bottom of it. There was, again, a big fight, resulted in 136 minutes of penalties being given out. We head back to Boston. It's going to be tough. Boston's a great environment, as we all know. Florida's a good team, though, and Boston technically has home ice now. They took 1 game in Florida, and that's all you have to do. That's your job. Take 1 on the road, and then you're set. You have home ice advantage now. You just got to win everything at home. A lot easier said than done, especially a team like the Florida Panthers that have this offensive and defensive ability just to completely shut them down. Completely shut down their team in the second and third period. And if the Boston Bruins are going to play like that, it doesn't matter how good Ullmark or Swayman is. They're not going to win this series. Florida Panthers are a dangerous team, and they're not a team like the Leafs that you can just kind of let do your thing, because they have a goalie in Sergei Bobrovsky and a defense that's going to be able to shut you down, as we've seen. But there was another game last night that I want to talk a little bit about. The Canucks took on the Oilers in Game 1 of that series, a series that can be really interesting. The Canucks have one of the greatest comebacks of the playoffs that we've seen. They scored 2 goals in 39 seconds at the end of the third period to take the lead. The Oilers, as we know, have Connor McDavid, have Leon Draisaitl, have a great, great offense. Their weakness, as always, is their defense and their goaltending. Stuart Skinner had not his greatest game. 792 save percentage, going against a third-string goalie in Silvos, who again, also not his greatest game, but it's tough when you're going against a team comprised of, you know, Zach Hyman, who had 2 goals on the day, and Connor McDavid and all those elite talents that this team has offensively. But a great comeback. They score 3 goals in the third period to win it. Again, 2 goals in 39 seconds, much like the Islanders did in Game 2 against the or again the Hurricanes did against the Islanders in Game 2 of their first round series. A very impressive win for this Canucks team, a team that has the offense, has the players to be able to keep up with a team like the Oilers. It's just not going to be there every single night. You know, we saw it against the Predators where they were able to get shut down by that elite defense. 1-0 games, like 12-shot games that they won just because they're a gritty team. And this Canucks team is really good. Don't count them out just because they're playing a team that, you know, has Connor McDavid on it. That Oilers team has a lot more holes than the Canucks do. It's just they have high-end talent and they're facing a third-string goaltender. This is not going to be an easy series for anyone, especially after what we've just witnessed. No lead is safe in hockey, and that's the fun part about the hockey playoffs. There is no such thing as a safe lead. A 3-goal lead, like we saw in this game, the most dangerous lead in hockey. They were up by 3 with 7 minutes to go in the second period, and then 4 unanswered goals from the Canucks puts them on top for good. A fun game to watch, a great game to watch, but the Canucks take this Game 1 at home. They needed it. They really did. They couldn't have afforded to lose both games at home. I don't know what the status is of Thatcher Demko, but if he can come back and the Canucks be tied, that puts them in a great position. It puts them in a great position to move on to face either the Stars or the Avalanche in the Western Conference Finals for the right to play the Stanley Cup. This is going to be these Western Conference semifinal series, both of them are going to be barn burners. Both of them are going to be a lot of fun. All 4 of these teams are so good, and they all play that West Coast hockey, that fast-paced hockey that you're not going to see in a more brutal, violent East Coast kind of hockey that you're seeing with the Bruins and with the Hurricanes and the Rangers. But it should be a lot of fun. Let me know what you guys think of the NHL playoffs. Who you think is going to take home the Stanley Cup. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But we will be back on Monday. I'm graduating from James Madison University tomorrow, so I will not be doing my show. I appreciate all of your guys' support. We will be back on Monday covering all the craziness of sports from over the weekend. I appreciate all of you taking time out of your Thursday to stick around and listen to me talk sports. You all have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday, same time, same place. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.